Nvidia for the quarter. Better than expected. Shares up 5% in after-hours trading. Let's get some reaction to that. Crossing live to Seattle in the United States now, where we are joined by Keith Fitz-Gerald, principal at the Fitz-Gerald Group. Good evening, Keith. Thanks for staying up late to speak to us.
And good morning. Thank you, as always, for having me back. What an honor.
You are impressed by Nvidia's earnings. Tell us why.
Oh, my goodness. What a home run. You know, many businesses have struggled, Richard, and the narrative, of course, has been that this would be terrible. But in fact, you know, this is a simple story, simple management, great results because they've kept their eye on the ball and stayed very, very focused.
One thing Jensen Huang did say, clearly the results were very good, China. He can't sell his chips in China anymore. He said that cost them about $8 billion in this quarter. What do you make of the China narrative?
Well, you know, it's interesting because the assumption for much of U.S. policy has been that China would never be able to produce its own AI and or its chips. Well, that's clearly wrong. And I think that Jensen Huang is correct in pointing that out. China is going to move on. China is going to develop its own technology. So the question is, how does that company engage it? And what can the United States do to get behind making that happen?
Yeah, because I watched his interview with Bloomberg a couple of hours ago, and he was full of praise for Huawei, their main competitor. He said it's a formidable company.
Well, I would agree with that sentiment. And during trips to China, you know, a decade ago, you know, I saw that beginning to blossom and thought to myself, you know, there's a global competitor in the works. And sure enough, today, that's exactly what we have.
So do we see any breakthrough in Nvidia selling, if not its latest Blackwell chips into China, but at least the second tier Hopper chips into China?
I would think so, because again, you know, this is not a business that does things randomly. I think that they're well ahead of that as an executional, you know, from an executional standpoint, because that's how they tend to operate. Government policy tends to catch up, but corporate policy tends to be ahead. So I think it's going to come to fruition. I think they're going to find a path forward. That's what they always do, and I expect them to do it again. Okay,
so do we buy, sell, or hold Nvidia on the back of this? Closing yesterday at 134 US dollars. It was up in overnight trading, close to a record high.
Well, obviously every investor is different, but I haven't sold a single one of my shares, and I hope I'm smart enough to buy a whole lot more because I think the stock triples in the next several years.
Lastly on Nvidia, Keith, I'm sure you were watching Jensen Huang's visit to the United Arab Emirates, where we are, about 10 days ago, with Donald Trump and this huge Stargate AI campus that they're going to be building in Abu Dhabi here in the UAE. Clearly it's a big deal for us, but as an outsider looking in, what did you make of that?
Well, I also think it's a big deal because, you know, what you're doing over there is very serious and it's focused on where the world is going, whereas much of, if you look at Europe, for example, they're focused on where the world's been. And the two are very, very different. So I firmly expect the technology initiative in your part of the world to bear massive profit potential over the next 5 to 10 years. And I fully intend to invest alongside that.
More broadly, we've got U.S. trade issues have had for several weeks now, several months. Late last night, late last night here, we had a US court ruling that many of Donald Trump's tariffs are illegal. He overstepped his authority, says a US federal trade court, and US stock market futures bouncing on the back of that. We haven't had much time to digest it, but what do you make of this news? Is it significant?
Well, it's too early to tell. My initial reaction is most of that is computers trying to cross-hedge or re-hedge the decision for tomorrow morning. So in other words, they passed the book based on late-breaking news. Now, whether or not that opinion stands, whether it has merits, you know, I'm not an attorney. I'm a finance guy. So I'm going to look at that as to how traders line up in Asian markets, in the European markets before that book reopens in the United States tomorrow. It could be significant, but I'm not sure it will be.
And in terms of the buyers of this AI technology, again, Jensen was pointing out that all of the big players, whether it's ChatGPT or Elon Musk's Grok or Gemini, you know, they are buying this at the moment. Can they all succeed, all these different AI chatbots or large language models, or are we going to see one or two emerge as the giants, as we have, for example, with Google in search?
That's a very smart question. I think it's too early to know. I think the difference in this race, Richard, versus other races for just a computer or a laptop or a tablet is that this is very much winner-take-all scenario. So every one of these companies, from Meta to Meta to Apple to Twitter to even Elon's Tesla, anybody has got to put some form of AI on the table. Now, Nvidia is great because they are the chips that are going to make that happen. So their demand is set for a long time, but who uses it, how they use it, too early to tell. You got to place your bets smartly and widely, I think.
Can I ask you, Keith, which one, if any, are you using, either in your work or your personal life? Are you a ChatGPT guy? Are you a Grok guy?
Well, we use a variety of the tools. We haven't settled on one because they all have their strengths and weaknesses. For example, Grok seems to be much more conversational. ChatGPT tends to make large errors with regard to numbers, but formats paragraphs well. So we actually still write 100% of our research and our thinking, but we use that for faster fact-finding to accumulate knowledge. So to me, it's, again, I think the jury's still out. The models have a long way to go. The thing that I wonder about is that none of the data scientists we talk to, Richard, know exactly how these models work. And that's kind of concerning.
Final quick word. Let's leave AI behind. Let's talk about the auto industry. Reading your newsletter, 5 with Fritz, today, yesterday, whatever it is. Stellantis, the car company created by the merger of Fiat and Chrysler. New chief executive, but you're not convinced, not necessarily by him as a person, but by the business. What's the story there?
Yeah, so I think as a business leader, he has got the talent. He gets it, 25-year industry veteran. He's led Jeep. He understands branding. But can the business recover from what was essentially a massive mechanical breakdown? I mean, to use an analogy from the car world, it's like the engine stopped. So he's got a long road in front of him, and it's going to have a massive sort of energy needed to turn that around. I would rather bet on companies that are not turnarounds, that are still raw growth, Tesla, for example, being one of them.
You stick to your motorbikes, Keith, with your good lady wife. Nice talking to you. Appreciate your time. Keith Fitz-Gerald there, principal at the Fitz-Gerald Group, staying up late in Seattle to speak to us.
Investments go up and investments go down. Before putting your hard-earned money into any investment, Dubai Eye 103.8 advises you to always do